In the stillness of night, whispers echo where people no longer walk, where shadows remember what history forgot. These are the stories of the places where the veil thins. This is the truth behind the Haunting Podcast. Before it was a prison, before it became America's most notorious island, Alcatraz was already feared. For centuries, native peoples along the California coast avoided the rocky outcrop. The Ohlone tribe called the bay home, but they regarded Alcatraz as a cursed place, an island of spirits. Those who broke tribal laws or were seen as spiritually tainted were banished there. Alone, surrounded by cold waters and strong currents, few ever returned. Some say the cries of those abandoned still echo on the wind. In 1775, the Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala sailed into the bay. He named the rocky island Isla de los Alcatraces, the Island of the Pelicans. For decades it remained a barren place, visited only by birds and whispered about as a land haunted by the restless dead. But as America grew, so too did the need to protect its western frontier. In the 1850s, the US Army claimed the island. They blasted the rock, built towering walls, and installed more than 100 cannons. Alcatraz became the most fortified military site on the Pacific coast, a guardian of San Francisco Bay. Yet even under the watch of soldiers, Alcatraz remained a place of punishment. In 1861, during the Civil War, the fort was repurposed to hold prisoners. Confederate sympathizers, Union deserters, and even Native American warriors resisting relocation found themselves locked behind its stone walls. Men who dared to fight back against the government often died here, their graves unmarked, their names erased. Over the next decades, Alcatraz hardened into a military prison. By the turn of the century, it was infamous. Prisoners were forced into silence, cut off from the world, kept in isolation on an island already feared as cursed. Even soldiers who guarded the rock reported strange occurrences: phantom footsteps in empty barracks, whispers carried on winds with no source. The island was gaining a new reputation, not only as a fortress of stone and steel, but as a place where the dead refused to rest. In 1934, Alcatraz entered its most infamous chapter. No longer just a military prison, it was transformed into a maximum security penitentiary. This was not a place for ordinary criminals. Alcatraz was the end of the line, the final stop for America's most dangerous men. The government wanted a prison that no one could escape, and few could endure. Among those shipped to the rock was Al Capone, once the most feared gangster in America. Here, stripped of his power, he was reduced to inmate number 85. Others followed: bank robbers, kidnappers, and murderers, each brought here because they were considered unmanageable elsewhere. Alcatraz was a machine built to break men. The prison regime was strict. 4 things only were guaranteed: food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Anything beyond that, talking, reading, even writing letters, had to be earned through good behavior. Cells measured 5 feet by 9 feet, a cot, a sink, and a toilet. That was all. Most inmates spent 23 hours a day inside. Some likened it to living in a coffin. The silence was suffocating. Inmates spoke of hearing only the pounding of their own hearts, the endless crash of the bay waters outside, and sometimes the cries of other prisoners echoing through the night. For many it was too much to bear. Violence erupted often, with stabbings in the mess hall and brutal fights in the yard. Others turned inward, battling madness in their cells. Solitary confinement was the harshest punishment of all. Prisoners who broke the rules were sent to D Block, the isolation wing. Inmates called it the hole. Inside these windowless cells, men sat alone in complete darkness. One survivor described it as being buried alive. The guards were firm, but not immune to fear. Some spoke later of feeling a chill run through the isolation block, as though invisible eyes were watching. Even then, whispers of the supernatural clung to Alcatraz's cold stone walls. Despite the rules, moments of humanity emerged. Robert Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, became infamous for keeping sparrows and canaries while in prison. Alcatraz was built as a place of order and control. But death was never far away on the rock. Over its 30 years as a federal prison, the island witnessed murders, suicides, and desperate attempts at escape. Each life lost added another layer to the legend of haunting that surrounds Alcatraz to this day. In a world of hardened criminals, violence was inevitable. Rivalries ended in bloodshed, knives carved from spoons or scrap metal hidden beneath mattresses. In 1943, inmate Rufus Franklin bludgeoned another prisoner to death with a hammer. In 1941, a convict named Joseph Bowers attempted to climb the prison's fence. Guards shot him before he ever reached the top. Some say his spirit still lingers near the fence line, restless in eternal escape. The most infamous bloodshed came in May of 1946, the Battle of Alcatraz. 6 desperate prisoners launched a violent escape attempt. Overpowered guards were taken hostage. Inmates armed themselves with guns smuggled from the guardroom. For 2 days, the rock became a war zone. Grenades exploded, bullets ripped through cell block walls. Terrified inmates cowered in their cells as the prison shook with violence. When it was over, 2 correctional officers were dead. 3 inmates were killed. 2 more were later executed for their role in the riot. The cell block where the battle raged still carries bullet scars in its walls. Some visitors claim they can still hear the gunfire, the echoes of that bloody standoff, trapped in time. For some, escape came not through violence, but by their own hands. Suicides were frequent on the island. One prisoner slit his wrists and throat with broken glass. Another stuffed rags down his throat until he suffocated. In 1937, inmate Theodore Cole vanished during a dense fog, believed to have drowned in the icy waters. Every desperate act left a stain on the rock. Even today, some visitors report sudden waves of sorrow, an overwhelming sadness with no explanation, as though the despair of those men lingers in the very air. Not all deaths occurred behind bars. The waters surrounding Alcatraz were as deadly as the prison itself. Death claimed many on the rock, but death did not bring silence. It only awakened something darker and far more enduring. One of the earliest and most chilling accounts came from the isolation cells of D Block. An inmate, locked alone in solitary, began screaming that something was in the cell with him. Guards dismissed his cries, thinking it another ploy for attention. But his terror grew worse. He shouted that glowing eyes were staring at him from the darkness, eyes that would not go away. Hours later, the screams fell silent. The next morning, the prisoner was found dead, strangled. No one else had entered the cell. To this day, some claim to glimpse those same burning eyes when they peer into the blackness of D Block. It wasn't only prisoners who spoke of the unexplained. Guards on night duty told of hearing footsteps pacing the cell blocks, when every inmate was accounted for. Some said they heard sobbing in the dead of night. Others reported moans or the clank of unseen cell doors opening and closing on their own. One guard swore he saw a phantom figure dressed in late 1800s attire marching across the barracks. When he tried to follow, the man vanished into thin air. Visitors too have reported strange encounters. One of the most common apparitions is known as the crying woman. Tourists exploring the prison chapel have described hearing weeping, low, heartbroken sobs echoing across the room. Some even swear they've seen a faint figure of a woman in period dress standing near the altar, only to fade as they approach. No women were ever imprisoned on Alcatraz. So who is she? Some believe she is tied to the island's earlier history as a military prison, perhaps the grieving spirit of a guard's wife, or someone who died long before the rock became a penitentiary. Even Al Capone himself is said to haunt the rock. Toward the end of his sentence, ravaged by syphilis, Capone spent long hours playing the banjo in the prison shower room. Today, some tourists claim they still hear the faint strum of a banjo drifting from the abandoned stalls, long after closing time. The notes of a gangster echoing across eternity. The ghosts of Alcatraz are not confined to one corridor. The island itself is saturated with lingering energy, but certain places, certain rooms are notorious. Places where visitors shiver, guards once feared to tread, and paranormal investigators return again and again. These are the hotspots, the most haunted corners of the rock. D-Block was where rule breakers faced their harshest punishment. Known simply as the Hole, these solitary cells offered no light, no sound, no comfort. Men were stripped naked, thrown into the blackness and left for days or weeks. Prisoners described hallucinations, panic attacks, even total mental collapse. Some never recovered. Perhaps that suffering explains the activity that continues here. Visitors report sudden cold spots, their breath visible in the air, even in summer. Tourists say they feel watched, followed by unseen eyes. Some claim to hear rattling chains, phantom screams, and even the moaning of men long gone. One of the most chilling stories comes from cell 14D. Guides say visitors step inside only to feel a wave of dread. Some have bolted out, pale-faced, saying they felt invisible hands push against them. Paranormal teams using EMF meters record sudden spikes of energy in the darkness. Many believe cell 14D is a gateway, a place where the suffering of the living left behind a permanent mark. The utility corridor beneath the prison is infamous for violence. In 1946, during the Battle of Alcatraz, several prisoners were cornered here by guards and soldiers. Gunfire echoed through the cramped space. Grenades shook the walls. When the smoke cleared, bodies lay scattered across the floor. Today the corridor is heavy with an oppressive energy. Guards once reported hearing phantom gunfire echoing through the passage. Shadows flicker where no light should fall. Some investigators claim to have captured EVPs, disembodied voices crying out in pain, as though the gun battle never truly ended. Of all the haunted spaces on Alcatraz, none is more unsettling than the hospital wing. Here, inmates underwent surgery, battled disease, and in some cases, died alone. The ward was filled with suffering. Many prisoners believed that death was preferable to being wheeled into these rooms. Today, the hospital is a hotspot for paranormal activity. Visitors claim they hear the squeak of wheels on tile, the rattle of chains, the soft moan of patients unseen. One paranormal team reported capturing a full-bodied apparition of a man in hospital gown, walking slowly down the hall before fading into nothing. Some believe the hospital is not haunted by a single ghost, but by many, a chorus of suffering that never left these rooms. Even before the prison, Alcatraz was home to the first lighthouse on the Pacific coast. Since 1854, it has stood as a beacon, warning ships away from the jagged rocks. But lighthouse keepers have their own stories to tell. Strange lights flickering in the fog, apparitions gliding past the tower, warnings whispered on the wind. Today, tourists sometimes glimpse glowing figures moving near the base of the tower, only to vanish when approached. Some hear a voice calling out, a spectral warning to sailors long gone. The lighthouse has guided the living, but perhaps it also keeps vigil for the dead. Alcatraz is filled with places where time seems frozen, where the cries of the past echo in the present, where visitors step into rooms of stone and steel and swear they are not alone. These haunted hotspots are more than relics, they're reminders. Reminders that the rock never fully released its hold on those who suffered here. And perhaps it never will. Since the prison closed in 1963, Alcatraz has become one of the most visited sites in the United States. More than 1 million tourists walk its cell blocks each year. But not all of them leave with only photographs. Some leave with stories they cannot explain. Visitors on daytime tours have reported sudden icy chills, phantom footsteps behind them, and invisible hands brushing their shoulders. One woman described standing inside a cell when she felt someone grab her arm. She spun around, but the cell was empty. Another man, a seasoned traveller, admitted he heard the faint pluck of a banjo drifting through the shower room. The same sound linked to Al Capone's ghost. Even park rangers, trained to dismiss superstition, have shared unsettling encounters. Some refuse to enter D Block alone after nightfall. Others claim they hear sobbing or smell smoke where there is none. In the 1970s, famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren visited Alcatraz. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, reported overwhelming waves of despair in the isolation cells. She claimed the energy of suffering was so strong it stuck to the walls like tar. Ed Warren later warned that Alcatraz was not just haunted, it was one of the darkest places they had ever investigated. Since then, countless paranormal teams have explored the rock. Ghost Adventures filmed here, capturing unexplained bangs and shadow figures. Most Haunted conducted vigils inside D Block, recording phantom footsteps pacing the halls. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, have been captured by multiple groups. Whispered words, cries for help, some so clear they defy explanation. In the age of smartphones, new evidence emerges every year. Tourists have filmed doors slamming shut, lights flickering, and strange figures appearing in photographs. A group in 2014 claimed to capture a full apparition in a window, a man staring down at them in prison garb. When they rushed inside, the room was empty. Of course, not everyone believes. Skeptics argue the stories are the result of suggestion, that the island's grim history fuels the imagination, that cold winds through broken walls explain sudden chills. But believers counter that too many stories overlap, too many voices whisper the same experiences. Alcatraz is more than stone, steel, and seawater. It is a monument to despair, violence, and human suffering. For decades it caged the living. Now many believe it holds the dead. The footsteps of guards long gone, the cries of prisoners who never escaped, the shadows of men who met their end within these walls. Some dismiss the stories as imagination, drafts, echoes, the power of suggestion. But for those who have walked its corridors, who have felt the cold hand of the unseen, Alcatraz remains a place where the past refuses to die. And now we turn to you. Would you spend a night alone inside Alcatraz? Tell us in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your fears, and your own ghost stories. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss our next investigation. Because there are many more haunted places to uncover, and countless more spirits still waiting to be heard. Until next time, remember, sometimes the dead don't stay silent. Thanks for joining us on the Truth Behind the Haunting podcast. If you enjoyed our journey into the supernatural, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow ghost seekers. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and stay aware of what moves in the shadows.